like to welcome you to the Radnor Township School District Combined Facilities and Finance Committee meeting today, February 19th. Our meetings were scheduled for last week. They were canceled due to snow, and so in an effort to be efficient, we are combining the agendas of Facilities and Finance because there's the same people. So in any event, with that, I'd like to get underway. We have a number of people here. Oh, welcome Mark Brooks, our new Facilities Director. So thank you, but I'm going to lead right into administrative remarks. Okay.
I just wanted to introduce Mr. Perrier. He doesn't have a nameplate yet, but it is Mr. Brooks. We'd like to welcome him officially on board. He started Monday a week ago, and he still came back, so we haven't chased him away yet.
2 weeks, 2 started.
Let's not keep that pace up. All righty, well, and you have no other comments for right now. Okay, great. Let's get right underway with public comment. If there's anyone who would like to come forward and make public comment at this time. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move right into the approval of minutes. We have both the approval of the January 8th Facility Committee meeting minutes and the January 8th Finance Committee meeting minutes. Was everyone okay with those?
Yes.
Great. And actually, Mrs. Booker will be along shortly. Okay, then let's get right underway into our agenda action items. Mike, why don't you take this since it's facilities right now?
Yes. Oops. Sorry. So, yes, we're doing the donations and, yeah, I mean, we're just doing the donations and disposals, right?
So these are the standard items we typically have on our board agenda. Donations, there is a donation for students with instrumental rentals that might need assistance. We will actually hold that in the clearing fund and work with the guidance counselor at Wayne Elementary School to make those awards. There's a contract with Bryn Mawr College for baccalaureate, and then there's disposals at the elementary buildings, Wayne and Radnor Elementary, as well as the high school.
All right. Okay, great. So we should expect to see those on our February agenda, just under the consent agenda. And with that, we'd like to get right underway with 4.2, the refunding of our 2014A general obligation bond. We have Zach Willard here from PFM. Welcome.
And Michael Lillies is also here.
Oh, Michael, welcome.
Hi. Good to see everyone. Can you hear me now? So it's either dated the 12th or the 19th, but I think you have it in front of you. You know, what we're going to talk about here is, you know, traditional high to low refinancing, where we're going to take old bond issues and take those interest rates, which are fixed, and replace them with today's new lower fixed rates. Now, it's kind of shocking because when we did these back in 2014, they're already at very low rates. So what we're going to talk about here is, you know, might be a window of opportunity that may not last real long. I don't know, we'll just kind of see. But if you flip to page 1 and look at that rate chart that you're probably used to at this point, okay, the bottom half of that, you can see since kind of Thanksgiving, all right, interest rates have come down significantly, so that's what's creating this opportunity, also timed with the call dates of 3 of your series of bonds, which are up, okay? So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at a series, you know, all 3, kind of the universe of all 3 callable bonds, but we're probably not going to refinance all of them because some of them will actually lose money if you refinance them. So what we're going to do is kind of go through an analysis where we're going to pick the efficient maturities to refinance. All right, does that make sense? Let's see, so if you flip to page 2, this just quickly highlights the different series that are callable. So your 2012 bonds there, the first 5 bullets, there's about 9.6 million. The call date is February 15th. Okay, so we just hit that call date. Remember, the call date is just the first possible date. It's not an expiration date or anything like that. And the average coupon on those is about 3%, so the average rate is 3%, so it's low. Okay. The second series there, the 2013 bonds, again, just about 9.6 million. Those have a call date of later this year. I'm sorry, of the end of last year, which was August 15th. And again, the average coupon is about 3%, so again, very low. And then the one that drives the transaction is going to be the 14As at the bottom. All right, so those are not callable until later this summer, but if you remember, you can do these 90 days before the call date, so the time to start planning is now. so you're ready to strike if interest rates are still good, so that you can, call the bonds on August 15th. The average coupon there is a little bit higher, so the average rate's about a 3.40. All right, so those are really the ones that kind of drive the deal. And if you look at the bottom of that, it just says, generally speaking, right now, based on current market rates, you can save about $185,000 net of costs, net of state reimbursement, because the state gets their portion back on some of these. And we're going to show you kind of a second option, which generates a little more savings. Okay. So again, we're going to look at all, we're just shy of 30 million of bonds here, but in reality, the transaction will probably be more like 10 or 12 million, depending on where interest rates are. If you flip to page 3, the top half of this page, this is all your different series of bonds lined up. Okay, we highlighted the 3 that we're talking about. And if you remember, the top half is the gross debt service, so that's what's in your budget. And then the bottom half is net of state reimbursement that you're supposed to be getting on some of your bonds. I think you are getting that currently, so that's good. And again, the call dates there are those yellow boxes highlighted at the bottom. All right. So again, we do need to kind of set this up and tee it up so that if things make sense and if interest rates hang in there, you're ready to do this transaction. And again, it's really based on that August 15th call date that's coming up. All right. And then page 4 is kind of the executive summary of the savings. All right, so we're not actually going to go through all these pages unless we want to, but what we're talking about here. So in the blue, what we did is we run what's called a maturity by maturity analysis of every single bond, all the way down through the final maturity dates of 2035. And, based on the yield curve, we can pick off the most efficient maturities to refinance. So in this scenario, based on kind of the rates that Mike gave us as of last week, we're refunding a very small portion of the 2012s. I think it's about $300,000 of those. A very small portion of the 2013s. Again, I think that's about $500,000. And then a majority of the 2014 transaction, 2014 A's. So you come up with a transaction that's just shy of 10 million. Okay, it's no new debt. We're just going to take those old bonds and refinance them. And if you scroll down, you can see the estimated net savings is about $184,000. Now, I know when we did this big refinancing plan back in 2014, I think at the end of the day we saved about $6 million. So this is not quite as exciting, but it is still an opportunity to squeeze a little bit of extra money out of there, and that's kind of our job, is to keep you abreast of that opportunity. Scenario 2, so I'll pause real quick. So is everybody okay with that? So scenario 2 is the same thing, the same bonds that we're going to refinance, but what we're doing is we're accelerating the principal payment dates by 6 months. So you're essentially going to pay off your debt 6 months earlier than you would currently. All right, and what that does, kind of like if you pay off your credit card bill or mortgage early, it's going to save extra money. All right, so in that scenario, you can see, if you scroll to the bottom of column 2 there, the estimated net savings is just shy of $300,000. And that's simply because we're going to be paying off the debt early. Now, we chatted, we want to chat with Michelle just to make sure there's no potential cash flow problems with that. I don't think there will be, but that's just one consideration you also want to keep in mind when you do something like this.
You just add one little aspect to that. When we're moving the payments up 6 months, it's within the same fiscal year, so it's not messing up your payments on a fiscal year basis. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think so normally you pay, February 15th. We're going to move those up same fiscal year to August 15th. Okay.
We can put a pin in this question, but that you're saying August 15th, which is really just as the tax bills are coming in or going out, you are going to, in terms of your cash flow. Okay.
Yeah, I think you may even have some other August 15th payment dates. And we can always, it can be whatever you want it to be. It could be September 15th too. What that'll do is it'll just shrink the benefit a little bit. The extra savings will go down. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So it's a little bit different than what we talked about, previously when we did the Dell Val. That was a little more complicated. This is kind of more your traditional refinancing of fixed rate debt. Going back to, when you were here for the 2014 and 15 plans, it's similar to that. Okay. So if we're good with that, what the next page is this will be our last page unless you want to look at the details of the numbers. But this is just an estimated timeline, just to kind of remind everybody, about how we go forward with something like this. If you want us to tee this up, okay, you can authorize us to proceed whenever you're ready. That doesn't lock us into doing anything, because this will wiggle around a little bit, and there's a chance that we may get to the first execution date and not be able to do it because the savings could go away, right? So all I think we want to do here is we want to get as far as we can down the planning road without incurring any fees, so that then we're ready to strike if interest rates are still hanging in there. And the first fee that you incur is the credit rating fee of any significance. That's the one where we're going to we can do all the work up until then. That gets us to about within 2 weeks or so of being able to lock in rates. So it kind of knocks out the first 6 or 8 weeks of paperwork. Okay. So if you scroll down this timeline,
What page is that?
I'm sorry, page 5.
I think that must be on your new one.
Oh, okay. Is it in everyone's handout?
You printed out the one that's for the 19th?
Yes, it's in there.
The 12th, it won't be in that document.
I have extras.
I have it.
I just printed it out, so
Oh, we do that? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I don't have it there.
You just don't have it on the computer, is that it, Michelle?
I don't have it on the computer.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so let's just scroll down page 5 real quick. So, we're here, well, actually, that was the 12th, but we're here on a week later. Your next board meeting is the 26th, according to the website. March 12th is another finance committee meeting. We can give you an update based on where rates are, or we can just give Michelle something quick to tell you. Again, we can kind of be doing some of the paperwork in the meantime, preparing the preliminary official statement and the credit rating packets. That's what really takes a majority of the time. And then the first possible date to consider a resolution, which would be March 26th. And if you remember from the past, that would be done in the form of a maximum parameters resolution, meaning it would be, we wouldn't have final rates and everything at that meeting. We would just have the maximum parameters set and a minimum savings target, which would tell us that we want to do this transaction, the board does, as long as we can save X, at least X. We'll always try to get way above that, but we want to know what the minimum is, okay? So that would be basically what would happen on the 20th. That would be basically what could happen on the 26th. And then the earliest, kind of date that we could lock in interest rates is the first part of April to settle the transaction within 90 days of the call date. So I went through all that quick because I know you got a lot to do. But I also know you've been through this a few times.
We've been through this. So a couple of quick, where are rates now that you're even considering? I mean, we're locked in at 3 and 3.4. Where are
So
rates?
if you flip to, let's go to the very last page. Flip all the way to the back. If you look in column 3, that shows you approximate interest rates, going out to 2031.
So it's the
again, those are-
1.79 and,
Yeah, that would be the 2020 maturity.
right.
And the long maturity, the 2031, that's about 3%. So basically, we're taking that old rate of a 340, which was the average, taking it down to approximately a 3, a 290, something like that.
Okay. So you'll be looking for, this is today's preview. We're not really taking action other than kind of this is a good idea to save, try to save some money.
Yeah, this is just to let everybody know this is available.
Mike, I don't know about you. I'm inclined, the accelerated payments, if they don't negatively impact cash flow,
Yeah, it's
I don't know why we wouldn't
no-brainer.
do that.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. And your savings, you're doing net fees.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's net of fees and state reimbursement, because they get some money back.
Right. And so you're giving us a heads up that you're teeing this up and you'll be looking for a parameters resolution in March.
Yeah, if you want us to, we can start to work on this with Michelle.
Yeah, they need an okay from us tonight to get started with Michelle.
Yes. Oh, I mean, I think that was pretty implicit. Yes, we would
Okay.
like to save a lot of money.
So
It's not 6 million, but it's not nothing. It's a few teachers, so
yeah,
it's
that's still
good.
money.
It's about 2 feet
Sure.
all in.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what we can do is we'll get moving. We will give Michelle an update for that next finance committee meeting. The only thing that we're gonna need to think about in the meantime before we come back for that resolution on March 26th is what the minimum savings would be, okay? So typically, 2% is a historical kind of PA benchmark, meaning that so that would be about $200,000 net of costs and net of state aid. You can set it whatever you want. I just caution you, if you set it too low, I mean, I wouldn't set it at $10,000 because, yeah, it's like not worth the trouble then. We'd rather wait until we can, maybe rates will move back to somewhere good. And if you set it too high, if you set it at 300, well, then maybe we'll never get to do it. So if you really wish we could save 225, then that's, if you understand what I mean, so. Keep
Okay.
that in your thoughts.
Alrighty, so I think, do you have questions?
No, the only I missed it. I apologize. I had to step out. Are we making a recommendation about scenario 1 or 2, or just asking them to look at both? I apologize.
No, I mean, we would, while you stepped out, we were saying that there's not really a, it doesn't negatively impact Michelle's cash flow because it stays within the fiscal year. So there's not a compelling, unless there's a compelling reason to not do the accelerated payments, to basically save an extra $100,000. I mean, that would be, I think, our preference, right? Unless something comes up in the next, month or so that would indicate a problem for you, I would expect the parameters resolution to be, one that includes the accelerated payments so that we can maximize the cost savings here.
I understand that, and the only question I had was whether there were concerns, because it does look like it means there'll be more money due from us in some of the out years, which we kind of expected less, and maybe that's fine, or maybe I'm misreading the table.
On, which page are you on?
Page 4, it looks like 2024 to 2027, it's a higher
Yeah, so.
amount due from us than the first scenario. Maybe not from what we're currently
Well,
expecting
actually, I'm
anyway.
sorry.
These are the savings.
Yeah, those are the savings,
Oh,
so.
ignore my
I
question.
guess kinda-
I'm
I
all
guess
set,
it's a
thank
little
you.
backwards. The
Local effort
positive
to me
numbers-
sounded like money we owe, so.
The positive numbers are the savings.
Got it.
Right.
I should have understood that. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anything else? All right, great. Well, we look forward to seeing you next month.
You were gonna add something.
Yeah, just one thing I was wondering, just in, Zach had mentioned the date that you approved the parameters. Oh, sure. Sure, thank you, sorry. Yeah, Zach had mentioned a little while ago that, when you adopt the parameters resolution, you'll need to state what your minimum savings are. We may actually need to know maybe a little bit before that, if it's possible, before the
right,
rating
yeah.
agency. But we can kind of work that out with Michelle and.
Do you need to know it before the February finance meeting? I mean, the March finance meeting?
It's getting closer to when we prefer to know it.
I would suggest that you confer with our business manager, and she'll recommend a
Yeah.
number to us, and I'm
That's what
sure
we
we're
did the
really not
last time
gonna-
we did the refunding. I worked directly with Michael and Zach, and we came up, I think we used 1.5% last time, just because we wanted to refund that one because it was a variable rate. So if that's okay with you, we'll do that again, and then they'll have all the information that they need to get started.
Sounds like a plan.
Good.
Cool.
1.5%. We're good? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay,
All right,
all right, thank you.
thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys. All right.
We're moving into the Bleacher update.
Yeah, so,
This issue.
the Bleacher update. Danny?
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Hoffer with the Schrader Group. Mr. Miller, committee members, thank you for having me tonight. I want to give you an update of where we are with the master plan for the athletic fields at Radnor High School. So what we thought we'd do was give you an overview of the process and the schedule to date and what we expect to see until we produce the final document which is projected in May. We've gone through a series of steering committee meetings and community input discussions that we'll give you an update on. And the next steps that we're about to embark on is the options for consideration by the school board. So let's talk a little bit about the process and the schedule. This is the schedule that we just embarked on in 2018. We had gone through about a month and a half of data collecting. We had our first steering committee where we established the committee and have been meeting ever since on about a monthly basis. We updated the facilities committee very early in the process, and we just had our fourth steering committee meeting this morning, or this afternoon actually. But we also had a series of two feedback workshops with the community, and it was really well attended, and we got a lot of great information in those meetings. So they were attended, these community-based workshops were attended by not only the school board, but district administration, building administration, public, and students also attended those meetings. So we had a really good sessions. About, I don't know, maybe 30 plus or minus people showed up at those meetings and had a lot of interesting conversations. Here we are today. Like I said, we had our 4th steering committee meeting this afternoon. Tonight is our update to you. We anticipate having monthly steering committee meetings for the next couple of months as we further develop the study and do the master plan final draft for review, and then we'll come to you around May with a final draft or final output of the study. So, like I said, we met with these community output meetings, and it was really a good way for us to get an understanding of the whole complex and a lot of the issues that people encounter that use it on a day-to-day basis that we don't necessarily have coming from the outside and not using the facility. We did what we call this little Wordle, where I took the meeting minutes and it flags like the most used words or comments that came out of the discussions that we had with the community. For Prevo, we were looking at the bleachers, obviously, was one of the main features that came up in discussions, but also the concession stands. I can't control how the words are. Probably I had a lot of comments that said both at Enki and at Prevo, so that's probably why the both is coming up. But you kind of get the idea that we have some issues with toilet facilities, parking, ADA accessibility, the concession stands, and other facilities at that facility. At the Enki field, again, looking at bleachers, home side bleachers, the slope, accessibility to the fields, and so on. So after we went through the steering committee process, we also met with the steering committee. And it was interesting as we started talking about it, what are the key points that kept coming up. And we really looked at it comprehensively. And so one of the first things that the committee kind of thought about was looking at just centralized facilities. Improved access points that serve not only Prevo, but also looking at Enki Field. That has ADA accessibility. And then a new concession stand with toilet rooms. Currently, it doesn't have any water or sewer there. A ticket booth and providing just better public facilities. Right now, you have to go into the facility to go to the toilet room, so just an overall improvement of public facilities. Then looking specifically at the Prevo's stadium and home side bleachers, one of the things that came up in discussions was looking at the proximity of the bleachers to the field. And it's really actually set back off the field. It's not only back off the track, but also set back further from that. So you feel like you're a long ways away from the field. So that was one of the things that came up in discussions. Again, the ramp going down to the field is very steep, not ADA accessible. And the band is bringing their equipment down. You have elderly people trying to get down there. You have wheelchairs trying to get down there. So that was a safety concern. There's a plaza, and I'll show you pictures of all this. So just kind of talking about it in general terms. The plaza up on the upper tier of the, in back of the bleachers there, kind of seems to be wasted space. So one of the things that we talked about was how do you repurpose that area, possibly demolishing a portion of it, and then providing some support spaces up there. Is there an opportunity to expand the athletic program that's in the building out into that space? Is there an opportunity to provide either a wrestling room, fitness room, something like that, some additional storage? Is there an opportunity to provide some toilet facilities up there so that you have access from the stadiums directly with maybe a ticket booth, some concession stands, that type of thing? And then where do you also provide some additional storage, team rooms? If they're located closer to the building, are they easier to supervise versus being a building that's remote from that facility? And then looking at ancillary facilities, again, the toilet room location came up in discussion time and time again. Does it get put in the proximity of the plaza and back of the bleachers? Again, being able to extend the water and sewer to those facilities. Is it outside the pool building where we may have an opportunity to create a new entry area into the pool for public use after hours? Was something that was discussed. When we were looking at parking and the queue line and how it was backing up into on Radnor Chester Road, we started thinking about, wait a minute, if we relocated the maintenance facility, which is integral to the high school building, and we pulled that facility out of the building and relocated it someplace else on the site, could we repurpose the area where the maintenance is now, provide some additional parking, maybe improve the circulation in that area? So that's some of the options that we looked at as part of the maintenance facility. And then where do you put the maintenance facility? Is it something that's between the two fields, or is it something that's accessed from Lancaster Avenue? So giving you overall look at the overall campus. On the lower part of the screen is Lancaster Avenue. The top left of the screen, and I'll say that north is straight up. So on the northwest side of the property is Radnor Chester Road. You can see the track around the stadium. So to kind of zoom in on that area, we identified some general areas that were of concern that came out of the multiple meetings that we've had. Looking at the access point off of Radnor Chester Road is really the primary entrance to the site when you're looking at the athletic facilities. But what happens is that the student drop-off, which we're showing there kind of at the crust of the corner between Enke Field in the stadium, as parents start to drop off their kids, it backs up traffic on the access into the site as well onto Radnor Chester Road. Because that's the main athletic facility, you can see the area where the parking is really kind of limited. There's also additional parking in front of the high school, which is pretty remote from the athletic facilities. And then you also have the student parking that's really, really remote from the athletic facilities on the east side of the property. When we look at point of entry to the site and accessibility, where currently the location of the ramp is something that we need to address. And then we talked about having other facilities that are not outside of the building, so people don't have to go into it, and visiting teams don't have to go into the building to use the toilet facilities. And then down on the lower part of the screen there, the service access for Route 30, is there a way that we might want to use that for some kind of access? So again, like I said, this was supposed to be last week's meeting, so things that we're addressing as part of the options that we began discussing today. We're not prepared to talk about the options, but just in general terms, what we're going to be looking at is how do we address the campus entrance and circulation patterns into the facility? Do we provide a new two-story field house right there at the entrance to the building? Or between the two fields, between the stadium and Enke Field? Do we provide a maintenance facility someplace between the two fields? Do we look at providing some parking in the yellow shaded area adjacent to the high school building that could improve circulation as well as provide some additional parking? That would be in closer proximity to the fields themselves and create more of an entry area at the location of the two entrances. So those are some of the things that we're starting to think about. Looking at the stadium, I think the board has held off on doing the improvements to the track until we've kind of finalized this study so that we can kind of combine projects together. But the track and the field are at the end of their useful life, so that's something that the board would need to consider in terms of improvements to that facility. And then looking at the area in blue is the actual stadium bleachers. Is there a way that we can replace those bleachers, bring them closer to the field, do some improvements, not only to that, but also providing maybe some support spaces up at the plaza there to support the function of the stadium. And finally, looking down again at the bottom at that Route 30 access, is there an alternate potential location for our maintenance filling down there? That can be accessed right off of Route 30, but it would be remote from getting utilities down there, so that was something that we would need to consider. We came up with some interesting ideas at the meeting this afternoon that we're going to continue to explore and come back to the steering committee to look at some different options for consideration. So it's a work in progress.
Does anybody have any, you guys have any questions?
No, you go.
There you go.
So this is clearly a lot of work, and I really appreciate all the effort you guys have put in. You're obviously working to really incorporate all the thoughts and concerns of the community. I have a couple of questions, and just so I understand, when you say support spaces, when you talked about potential uses for the plaza, is that just a general term for all the other things you listed, or is there something else that would be part of support spaces?
It could be anything. It could be a wide range of things. It could be support spaces that support the educational program in the building. For instance, it could be a wrestling room, a fitness room, toilet facilities, storage facilities, whatever is needed to support the building itself.
Okay.
It could be support facilities that support the outside functions of the building. Concession stands, ticket booth, storage, mechanical spaces, toilet facilities. So those are kinds of things that we talked about. Looking at access from the plaza might have different functions than if we did a two-story building, because there's quite a height difference there.
Right.
On the lower level, what we could do in a two-story configuration is provide maybe team rooms that support visiting teams, home teams, storage rooms, band storage. You know, that's what I mean in terms of support facilities.
Okay. And then when we talk about a new maintenance building, that's because, are you talking about actually getting rid of the current maintenance facilities that are attached to the building?
Repurposing the current maintenance facilities that are integral to the high school building, pulling that out into its own standalone structure. Okay. And again, what does that look like? I don't know. I don't have the program for that yet, but we're looking at potentially it could be service bays for maintenance of equipment. It could be office areas, storage room areas, toilet facilities, those kind of support pieces. And what that does is potentially provide opportunities over at the building that we could open up that area a little bit, maybe provide some additional parking, maybe pull some of the traffic into there to give us a longer queue line. So those are the kinds of things that we're looking at.
Okay. I guess I would just ask that Mark and Todd, because you have history with this, consider what operational efficiencies would be lost in having the maintenance building taken away from the main building, just in terms of time of people traveling when they get called over to help with something at the high school. And maybe that's not the primary use for those maintenance facilities. I've seen them and I don't remember, but it would seem to me like there may be. I just would want to make sure we're not creating problems by moving them away from the building. So the field house, I think you said this, the idea there is that it would be potentially storage, concessions, potentially a toilet room.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ideas that are being considered. If we create a field house situation between the two fields, again, what is that program? It could be, again, I think there's a, what do we say, a 12-foot difference in 12 feet.
Yeah, it does seem to.
Grades
really
are
steep,
so
it's really steep
deceiving.
hill.
Grades are so deceiving.
The hill, those stairs that you walk down into, and the field, that grassy area between the two buildings.
We take the stairs down from the
Oh, yeah, so it's like way more than that, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. So a floor-to-floor height we typically figure is 14 feet in a school.
Okay.
So, you know, you're close to that. And so you would have potentially an upper level and a lower level. The upper level could be a plaza area overlooking the fields that may have a concession stand, a ticket booth, something there. Lower level, again, could be some team rooms, toilet rooms, storage rooms. You know, it could be any combination of things. And then looking at the other side, over by the plaza area, again, the same things. That could be another facility that has similar functions there. We haven't quite decided.
Okay.
Or it could be, you know, both or either or we bring both to the table and, you know, that's something that the board considers.
Okay. I think the only other question I had, one of the concerns I had, just because I know that this is the secondary placement an alternative placement for the new maintenance building. If you were going to put a maintenance building in that kind of grassy strip, I know that gets really, really wet, and I know we already have trouble with flooding in certain areas. I just would want to make sure that constructing something there wouldn't alter the water runoff and create problems for either of those fields that are going to need maintenance.
Yeah, there's a creek that I can't point on this. So there's a creek that runs in the wooded area there. So the field is sloping to that area. That's probably why it's wet there. You know, maintenance facility, we're showing a box there for a building, but it's going to require access to it by a paved driveway and parking and whatever, you know, other facilities, whether it's sidewalks or something that go to that. So obviously there'd be a redevelopment of that area if we put a maintenance facility there.
Okay. So I did have one other question. I apologize. The only other thought I had, and maybe you've discussed it, and there's a bad reason it's a bad idea. The existing parking lot that's off that baseball field there.
Yeah.
Is there a reason that couldn't be a 2-story parking garage?
Money.
Well, but I mean, all of this costs some kind of. I understand that. Is part of the problem with that is it doesn't fix our traffic.
Right.
Okay.
There's also the road, and we were talking about that today, there's also the road on the right side of that goes out onto Radnor Chester Road, which is a right turn only. Is there a way that we somehow use that to help improve the circulation pattern? So the way we left it after our steering committee meeting today is that our site civil engineer is going to go back to the office, have his traffic people look at the campus overall, the intersections around the perimeter of the building, of the campus, to see if there's ways that we can improve circulation. And all those are on the table.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I would, and I'm sure you're doing it, but make sure you're really keeping in mind is kind of the safety of our students. You know, moving that new maintenance building down there, putting in a parking lot and some kind of space where people are driving. Kids cut across that area all the time, and they cut across it at night when they're on the fields. You know, some of these sports they're playing as late as 9 o'clock, so they're playing under the lights, and I just worry. Yeah,
that's one thing we talked about today is just the cross pedestrian traffic between the two, and do we really want to put a road through there, or do we want to keep that as like a pedestrian plaza there? Be a great place to, hold fairs and that kind of stuff, and have, if there's events going on, leave that a grass area.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, a couple. First, I guess the plaza, I'd like to be sure that we're taking into consideration when we think about repurposing the plaza, what it actually is used for today. So during the ball games, kids go up there and play. It gives them somewhere to go that's not on the field or external to the field. And for the younger kids, our football games attract a lot of middle school kids who have short attention spans. About halfway through, that's it. They're done watching the football game, unless it's exciting, which it was this past year, but they're done watching the game and they're up there socializing. So having a space for the socialization. I also happen to know from past experience, that's where the color guard practices. Getting ready for halftime routine, they practice up on that plaza area because the kids aren't there yet. They practice. When they leave to go do halftime show, the kids pretty much take it over and make it a basketball court. So just want to make sure that we're looking at the current uses of that space before we repurpose it.
Okay.
The maintenance and the trucks, appreciate the idea of looking at that, because in all honesty, when we went back and looked at the whole traffic flow and the changes we did recently make on the property, we considered that an area we weren't going to make any modifications to because of its importance and its use. It's the only maintenance facility, really, that in any of our buildings where the maintenance guys actually have a home base. It's where all the trucks are. There's 16 to 20 trucks in there at any given time. Plus people park their cars in there. The maintenance guys use that as their space during the day when they take out the school district cars and trucks to be able to park their own vehicles. It's an essential space for our maintenance operation. So if we're going to move it out, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, if that's, prime real estate, we can reuse it for handicap parking or something else, I'm all in. But I would definitely like to understand that from a much bigger picture. Not just the building space, but the access and enough parking for all of that equipment. So for those who are not aware of the history of the circulation on the property, I didn't know we were doing a study around the circulation on the property.
It's one of those things.
I just want to be clear that the scope of this is not getting out of control. We spent literally 2 whole years, and you'll remember this because I think you were a good part of some of it, 2 whole years every month talking about the circulation on this property and the decisions that we made to create that road that runs down the right-hand side of the baseball field, to create an in and out on that property. That did not exist there previously. We intentionally did a right-hand turn. That was a PennDOT requirement, quite frankly. So making that any more, I'm not sure you can even make that a left-hand turn there because PennDOT said no the first time around. But we did a lot of time and study on this site and argued, really, over the multi-million dollars we spent on these parking lots and that driveway. So I just want to make sure that it's only been in there, installed and in use for what, 3 years now? So to me, that's like a fairly substantial capital improvement we made to that site, and I am, for one, not interested in revisiting it at this moment in time. I just think there's a whole lot of other things for us to be working on besides that. That's my take. Other things, I guess, I have a couple of other quick questions. So interior changes in any of the work that you guys are doing, are there discussion other than facilities, which I saw on your note here, any other discussions with regards to interior facilities?
No.
Okay.
Within the building footprint?
Yes.
No.
Okay, cool. Because there's a rumor going around that we're going to be replacing all the gym floors, and it's all part of this project. So you guys should know that. It's the rumor on the street, and actual programs are being told that they may shift their use of the space because we're going to be replacing the floors. I never even heard us even discuss that. It's a fairly substantial financial investment. And I'd like to know where that money's coming from, if we're in fact going to do that.
Can I address that because I think there has been an issue up at the high school in the main gym where we did have water penetration, and we had a bowing of our floor in the gym. That's actually an insurance issue. It's been turned over to the insurance company.
Okay.
And we are going to be sanding down that floor in the summertime. We were going to be doing it ourselves anyway, but now that it's an insurance issue,
Fine.
the floor is going to be sanded and resurfaced.
But that's
in
our
the summer.
normal maintenance operation on a periodic basis of the gym space.
Right, and
So there's not a whole new floor going on
it's
other
not a
than
whole
whatever the
new
insurance
floor.
is going to
There
fix
is
for
a
us.
section, small section of the floor that has been replaced. That is new flooring because of the bowing that had occurred there.
Gotcha.
The water problem has been resolved and has been repaired.
Awesome.
So we're just trying to, get through basketball season and, coordinate having that floor redone because it's roughly a 4 to 6 week process.
Was that water, just out of curiosity, was that internal water damage like, as a result of a pipe burst, or is that water stormwater?
I'm not exactly sure. It was not a pipe that burst. So
Okay.
in the gym area where the concession stand is, there was a pipe that was level to the ground, and it wasn't capped. And there had been water that had been coming. So I don't know if it was coming off the roof or where it was coming from.
I hope it wasn't sewer.
I believe it was coming from the roof drain.
And then we got a bigger problem.
So when we did locate the area of the water penetration, the maintenance men actually raised that pipe up, and now it is capped, and
Oh, nice.
the water is no longer getting underneath the floor.
Perfect.
So.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I appreciate that. So.
Whisper down the lane.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
my only concern is when we go out with these kinds of things and we're asking for people's inputs, this is going to take me by the next thing, is the scope of all of this. The original plan was looking at our needing to replace bleachers, those most close to the building related to the football field, and then of course we want to fix whatever's going on down at the turf field on Enke side, because there's definitely more use down there than those were ever designed for, and they weren't really designed to be bleachers. So I'm mostly concerned, this is not a you thing, by the way. I appreciate you're getting all this input and everything, but this is like a conversation amongst us. Again, I will remind, getting the modifications that we did to the high school was 2 years of dialogue and a year of installation for the driveway and the few parking spots that we added onto the site, right? It's a 3-year process, and it could have gone longer if we didn't get a little impatient with it. I am concerned about the scope of what we're doing here. There's a ton of nice to haves, a ton. I appreciate all of it, I really do. If we had all the money in the world, I'd just say fabulous, do it. But I feel like we're getting into an area of wasting time, wasting our this is my perspective, and I'll leave it at that, and it doesn't need a debate, but I feel like we're wasting people's time. We're pulling together, asking them about all this nice-to-know stuff when we know budgetarily we cannot afford all of these nice things. And I am very concerned about taking the attention away from replacing the bleachers, which is the issue. And it's not it's already been 2 years more. We've been talking about replacing these bleachers, and now we've just opened the scope with all these discussions, and it's going to distract us from what we really needed to do. The urgent thing is replace the bleachers. That's my speech. I'm sorry if it sounds negative. I don't mean it to sound negative, but I think we need to get practical here. The bleachers need to be cared for. We need to get to it. And then there's the budget. You know, just even how are we going to even cover the cost of the bleachers, assuming that we have the structural issues, which I know were identified as a part of some of this pre-work. So I appreciate the pre-work you're doing, but we've got people out in the community who think because they've asked for stuff, they're getting it. Like it or not, they do. They think they're getting a 2-story, you know, concession stand and this and that and the next thing. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Sorry. But I appreciate all the pre-work that you're doing here. I really, really do. And I think maybe it creates a strategic plan for us at some place in time. But I want to get us back to the urgent matter.
And I think that, you know, your points are good points. It was emphasized at both the evening sessions that, you know, I even shared the story that as superintendent, I'm not allowed to think out loud. You know, it becomes dangerous because, oh, Ken wondered about this. That must mean the superintendent wants to do this. So we shared that as an example at our 2 evening sessions that, you know, we've gone out to the community, we opened it up to the community, we opened it up to our booster groups, to our musical parents, to, you know, our marching band, to the different groups who use our facilities. One of the things that came out that I was really taken back by at the meetings, the evening meetings, was this emphasis from many people in the community, longtime community members and also parents who are, you know, maybe, you know, some who are born and raised here, some who aren't, that we take the time to make sure that we are looking at everything, that if we're going to tear down bleachers that have a retaining wall behind it that looks like the retaining wall is going to have to be replaced as well, what else should we be possibly doing at that time? And so that was part of the discussions. And I think as we had discussions here as a board about setting this up in this project and going in this direction, we talked about the idea that we want to understand what are the different options and what are the different things we look at, but we're eventually going to have a discussion about what can we afford and what do we need to do? What is a priority list and what are those things that are most critical for us and what are those things that we can afford? And maybe part of it might be in the discussion that there's a larger plan that, you know, we can only do this right now, but maybe down the road. Here we're leaving opening for future discussions for, you know, other possibilities. One of the things we discovered as we really looked at our facilities, and this is true of any, you know, I think school complex, is things just get added and happened without standing back and having this large plan and saying, okay, this is what's going to make sense for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so that was part of the discussion in saying, let's look at these options, let's understand what it is, and then, yeah, we're going to have to make tough decisions, though, and say, we can't do this, or we can do this, or what are the pieces that make the most sense.
Yeah, and I sincerely appreciate the idea of a strategic plan guiding long-term decision-making. There is no doubt I'm all in. But how long does that go on? How long before we have what we feel is a strategic plan? Because if it's truly strategic, then we really need to invest the time and the energy in putting together a well-thought-out strategic plan. That we're all willing to say, hey, yeah, we want to build a roadmap that's going to get us there financially, schedule-wise, other priorities, those kinds of things, so that it truly is that guiding tool that you've suggested, which I think is a great idea. But the problem is we have very urgent needs now. And I know that I have been on the bleacher, we need to fix them now thing for now, 18 months, where I am like, we are past replacing these bleachers in my mind. And We have not started the process of the construction or the design around the bleachers because we haven't yet made that decision. It is February, for all intents and purposes, March upon us. It's not going to happen this year. This is going to have to maybe happen next year, but only if we can get it to the top of the list and we actually have that discussion and move into a design phase, especially with the retention wall. So I think any of the stuff we're looking at within, I think the conversations can run in parallel. Because the stuff that you've looked at or suggested here, except one comment you made about possibly moving the bleachers closer to the field, was the one comment that I heard that was related to the bleachers. Maybe we need to make some decisions around that and get started on the bleacher design in parallel to looking at all the other structural things we might want to do at some place in time. Moving that maintenance building has nothing to do with the bleachers. The building is there unless we're physically going to move the bleachers, which I would argue, again, why would we move them any closer to the field? You have the track, you have a place for people to walk, you have the track where the cheerleading squad and the football team and other people utilize, and then you're on the field. So I can't imagine moving them much closer other than maybe 10 feet. But, so would we really go through the cost of that? Unless it's structural, if we have to make that wall sound, great, fine, let's talk about it. But can't we get to a place where we're running these two things in parallel? I don't see why not.
So thank you for coming out. Sitting here thinking for a minute between Mark and Mike, as both alumni, the last time there was like a major redo of this campus. I think it's been a long time. And I know, Patty, let me just say where you and I agree. I think we do have to not get embroiled in a parking circulation thing at this particular time. And I say that because Patty and I were both on the facilities committee when we built the new circulation and built the, kind of reconfigured the parking in back behind the high school, and there was a very robust conversation. We did have someone who wanted to turn that baseball field into a parking lot, and there was lots of conversation, and there's some fundamental things about the property that are not going to change. If you look at this picture, I don't know which page it is, where you see the overall schematic, you just cannot avoid the fact that our field space, our big turf field spaces are about as far away from the majority of our parking as can possibly be. It is just how the high school is built. And I don't envision entertaining a situation where we completely reconfigure the entire high school property just to bring parking closer to Prevost and to Enki. We have what we have there. The 2-3 remote parking spots, because we do have yet even a fourth one, teeny tiny, that's where they are. I'm a little puzzled about the maintenance, moving of the maintenance building for the following reason. I feel like I remember that area quite well. I've, tucked my car in there on occasion when I was doing student projects and, bringing stuff into the building. There's a very tight turnaround in there. And there's a set of stairs that come down that basically connect the back student parking lot to the back of the building. I know that parents park up in the parking lot and bring their kids down for swimming. So there's community members who use the parking lot and then come down those stairs and basically walk across that, what is now the maintenance parking lot. I think most of the time that's not an issue because most of the time the maintenance vehicles that are there are stationary. I would be a little bit more concerned about what circulation would look like to bring cars, frankly, so close to the building. Most of our parking is not that close to the building. Active parking. The maintenance guys come in, they park, they take the trucks and go. I would be concerned about bringing active moving vehicles so close to the building. That's me. And I agree with Patty that, for now, we maybe need to stay focused on, the facility itself, the bleachers that we discussed, and I am a believer that right now, while we're pulling down bleachers and potentially looking at structural issues, are there other things that make sense to bring into the back of the building, the back part of the campus, while we've got that all pulled apart?
Mm-hmm.
You know, with all due respect to the concern about finances, to me, this is potentially the kind of project that we have to look at as a capital investment. You know, it's been 20, maybe 30 years since a significant improvement has been done to the back part of this, other than the track, you know, converting the fields, but that wasn't a major, like, reconfiguration of things. And so if I view this as a capital improvement, it's a little easier for me to justify potentially issuing a bond and looking at this as a longer-term investment to our high school. I do see the possibility of bringing potentially, maybe using that maintenance area as handicap parking and, you know, improving our accessibility issues. And if we had a compelling reason to move the maintenance building, you know, potentially out on what we used to call a junior lot. So the seniors used to be able to park close to the building, and the lot that's right off of Radnor Road, we used to call junior lot. Back when the juniors used to be able to park at the school, Mark's nodding his head. There was a time when that was actually the case. You do still call it the I don't think juniors really get to park there, though.
They get in trouble when they do.
Right here.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
the lower lot.
So in any event, what the other thing, though, to address Patty's concern about that we can't kind of just churn our wheels for 2 years, that there is, you know, what kind of drove this original issue was the bleachers. And one of the things I appreciated was seeing a timeline at the beginning of this this presentation that, you know, you are looking to bring this back to us in 3 months. And so, you know, we're going to have some tough decisions to make, but it's not without an end date of when we have to be thinking about that. I would agree. I think that we're not going to be able to do everything. I think we are not going to be able to do everything. And I really do, I like some of the things that you're bringing in here and the ways you're thinking about it. So I think I'm more inclined to look at what else makes sense while we're under the hood. However, I think that there's a limit to that, and I would agree with Patty, not getting too bogged down in a redo of the parking and the circulation. You know, at this time, what we might want to think about is, in a staging kind of way, is considering ways to make those remote parking lots more user-friendly and accessible to the back of to the part of the property that has the bulk of the athletic fields. The other thing I just wanted to mention, the resurfacing of the turf field or the track. I feel like in my time on the board, we've talked about those. I don't know the last time. Are they really at the end of their life? Because I can't remember when they were installed. That's a separate line item. I don't want that to be lumped in as oh, look at now we're doing this. No, no, no. When we put in those fields and that track, we always knew that they were going to require a periodic, you know, significant outlay of money to keep them up to speed. So, you know, it makes sense while we're ripping everything up if the timing coincides. I just don't want to lump that in as a look at now we're doing that as well. We always needed to keep those maintained. That was always a conversation.
So the track resurfacing has been on the capital plan as well as Prevost Field. We actually talked about it last year where we said we're going to push that project so that the resurfacing of the track aligns itself with the resurfacing of the field. The track was installed, I believe it was around 2000. The way the track is set up, it is designed to have 2 resurfacing before it actually needs a major replacement. This will be the second resurfacing of this track. So in about 12 years after we have this resurfaced, it will need to be replaned as well. So that will be a much more expensive resurfacing than what we're currently doing because it actually will be leveling out the track. If you've taken a look at the track, I don't know if you've been out on the track, especially where the long jump area is, there is some damage that really needs to be replaced and should have probably been patched a while ago that we just have not done. So both of those are getting to the end of their useful life. Todd can address the turf field. He has had testing done on that.
Yeah, there's testing called GMAX to test for concussions, and there's a range that's out there. We had testing done in 2017 and 2018. We're still within the suggested limits. But we are getting closer to those thresholds because the field is getting older and more compact. But we're still fine for GMAX.
Okay. The only final thing I would say about it, in the cafeteria plan of the things we can and can't do, and, you know, I agree with Patty, the bleachers are definitely at the top of the list, but one of the things that's come, you know, become abundantly clear, just anecdotally, community members have come out, the pictures tell it very clearly. We are not responsive with ADA accessibility, and that has got to be corrected here. We have got to have this be a safe and accessible part of our campus. And, you know, if the conversation about bleachers was the impetus that caused community members to come out and speak so eloquently about this, fine. It doesn't mean that the need didn't already exist. And, you know, I know what it's looked like to help kids bring band equipment down that ramp. Boy, you just keep your fingers crossed that you never let go of a xylophone, you know, or a vibraphone coming down there. So, you know, that is absolutely up there as well.
So if I look at the schedule, going back to your page with the schedule, so it's talking about having a master plan come back before us here in May. I'm asking, is there any reason we can't get started on bleacher design in parallel? What is stopping us from getting started? Because the reality is, if this doesn't come back us here in May, then we have to bicker over it here at this committee level. Then we have to make a recommendation to the whole board, which is probably going to take a couple of meetings because we never agree on the very first options, which we shouldn't. We're supposed to deliberate over everything that we do. So to me, that means we're not going to see probably an agreement on even a master plan until after the summer or the end of the summer. Assume August, September timeframe. If we don't start design of bleachers until that timeframe, it means we're potentially missing another season. So I'm asking again, is there any reason that we can't start looking at real bleacher design?
Well, the bleacher design would be part of the master plan that you would present.
Yes, but she's talking about going out
I mean,
in
preparing
parallel.
Construction documents for
Yes,
bleacher
in
design
parallel.
But that's
versus
kind of,
part
that's
that.
presuming, that's making a cart before the horse that we're not doing something behind them or, you know, augmenting them. I mean, Patty, I hear the concern and, you know.
It's okay. I got it. We're going to go round and round. It's all good.
well, no, we're just,
don't have to go round and round.
part of the reason that we need to do the master plan is because the ADA requirements.
So I'll just remind that we actually sent out an RFP for bleachers now well over a year ago. We were ready to go with bleachers a year ago. We put them on hold to do a big master plan, which has a lot of wishful thinking. Financially, I still don't know where we think we're going to get the cost for it. I just feel like we're pushing it off. And I'll be done
Well,
because I'm the only one who feels that way.
No, I don't. I felt like we're pushing off the bleachers too, but I don't want to do it wrong. I mean, you come to this facility, when you come in off Radnor Chester Road, you don't even know you're at Radnor. You know, there's no signage or anything. We've got one of the worst designed football stadium, concession stand, choke point, ADA access, parking. I mean, it's the whole thing is, I can't say my favorite word on TV. You know, so we figured while we're here looking at this, let's see what the community wants. So that's what we're doing.
I do think that we have an opportunity, though, at the February board meeting, you know, maybe to get I wouldn't necessarily have Danny come back, but just a quick update from facilities of what's going on. And, you know, let's hold ourselves accountable.
Start arguing now.
Well, let's hold ourselves accountable. I like to be more positive. Let's hold ourselves accountable to not engage in this in a way that spins our wheels to Patty's concern. Let's be ready and informed as a board to be able to make that, you know, to make a substantive decision come May. I think if we, you know, look, we're on the facilities committee, we're aware, we're paying attention, you know, we give the board packets to all of our board members, but let's make a point of, hey, everybody, let's be paying attention, let's be thinking, let's pass along good questions, let's really be ready to keep things moving forward. And let me just say, welcome Mark Brooks, and thank you Todd and Michelle, as they've held down the yeoman's work of this for the last year and a half. You know, everybody is really happy to welcome you aboard to help us, you know, help help us get going and move forward. Exactly. And that's not to take anything away from what Todd and Michelle do, but they have other responsibilities, and we are at a perfect time to really capitalize on your arrival.
We may even get you a nameplate if you stick around to next month, so. This conversation has been helpful, and I'll just not to debate it, but just as a concluding piece. It was informative for me to hear the parking pieces, traffic flow. I gotta tell you, where I get the most complaints that rise up to my office are not field usage complaints or, I mean, all those things go on. But where we have had a lot of time and energy, and we put a lot of people to this problem over the last 2 years. I mean, you two are nodding. Make sure I'm not going off on a. We hear a lot of complaints and issues about our traffic flow and about, access to the campus, whether it's during our at the end of our day, or then it's when our fields are being used by our youth programs in the evening. So maybe it doesn't need a whole reconfiguration, but we have to realize that this was helpful for me to hear that that you feel like this has been dealt with and we've done this.
Well, there's some files you guys could look through.
There's some files, but that's good. It'd be good to look through the files, but we also need to talk about the last 2 years, the significant amount of complaints and pictures, 5 or 6 o'clock from residents saying, "Here, I'm stuck in traffic."
Brought up a really good point, which I appreciate she did that. We had 2 years of discussion about what to do on the site, not the least of which included the idea of getting rid of our baseball field to provide parking. And
nobody's suggesting that right now. Nobody's suggesting that.
But I'm saying that we went that far. We talked about access off of Lancaster Road in and around the, where the baseball field, right where you said you were going to put the maintenance. Should we bring people in that way or make that an out? We spent 2 years and a lot of consulting dollars looking at a variety of options.
Well, that's good, because we'll find that. We need to, because this has come up with the group.
And there were also some rules that were put in place when we did it, not just rules, but agreement, because it also was tied in with the expansion of the turf field. Yes. The two soccer and lacrosse teams came to us right when we were in the final throes of making decisions about what money to spend where and where to park and all that stuff. And there was an agreement from both of those organizations that they would work with their parents not to park down there, to make that a drop-off point for the kids and go up and find a parking spot and walk. Yes, I mean walk. I'm sorry, you can't park right next to the field. It's a sporting event. Get a little walk. Walk from this lot to that lot. You'll be okay. So will your kid. It's all good. But we didn't get that help from the sports teams after all. They tried, but it's to some degree a moot point, and it has created issues on that site. And we've had trouble, obviously, trying to police that and get their ongoing continued support, especially since the teams change every year and they're new parents. And I get it. It's not like some factory where you can set it up and it's a constant. But the reality is we debated all of those things with the community for 2 years.
So I will say, as a parent of a child who does use those facilities off hours, we get regular emails. So I know the district is getting complaints because we get regular emails reminding us of our obligations not to drop off, not to park in certain places. So it's not that people don't know, but I will tell you, I live a mile from the high school, and I have considered walking my daughter there rather than try to deal with the parking, because I will pull in, and I'm talking Sunday midday, winter outdoor soccer practice.
I know.
It is not a time that seems like it would be busy. I will pull in off that road. There's no parking along the side. Even if I wanted to park where it says no parking on the end, I can't even just pull up there and set up. I go up to the upper lot. There's no space in that upper lot across from the maintenance facility. Even those extra couple little spaces along the edge behind air gas, they're not available. So I go out
to where the teacher's
and I wrap
office.
around and I do the loop, and I think, well, somebody will have pulled out by the time I get back around there, and nobody has. And I would happily drop off my child, but she's 11 years old, and frankly, I don't trust everybody else driving through there to drop her off. And then you get the backup of the people double parked, and you get, so I appreciate that the two of you who were on this committee years ago when this was done feel that the parking circulation has been dealt with. But I also
no, I'm just saying that we did invest a lot of time.
It's an age-old problem.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But what I'm saying is, it hasn't been solved. So I understand the administration's frustration and the community's frustration. I mean, I guess my question, when PennDOT, do you recall when PennDOT said you had to turn right out of there, did they say we had to leave that first road two-way? I mean, if you had that as a one-way circle.
No, that was our doing. We initially, one of the designs was to make that one-way.
A one-way loop.
And we got enough pushback from people on the site and from the parents that they did not want it one way that way, because that puts you out on, it just puts you the wrong way, and you had to go down around King of Prussia Road, and people didn't want to be on that side. So yes,
Yeah.
I sincerely, I bet you I still have every single packet from those meetings. I'm happy to share, and maybe we have a separate session where we talk about what we did. That's not to say you can't do it better, but I do, one thing, my last thought, and then I'll be quiet because I know we have other things on the agenda, and I don't mean to overtake this, because you can tell this is my thing. Getting a traffic light on at the entrance to Raider Road was my existence until we got one. I'm thrilled to death it's there. It's made the site a much safer site for kids walking on and off and trying to pull out of that site. And I feel like I can leave the district in a much better place because that traffic light is there now. But on the campus, we said when we were expanding that turf field, again, it was all kind of wrapped around the time we did this parking expansion, that adding more things onto this very landlocked, control, like flow restricted site was going to create problems. And it in fact did, because we now have more usage and there's more people, and you got 2 turf fields, and it's great because they're side by side for practice, and that's awesome, but that means way more people on the site. So I just leave you with one thought. Adding any of these other amenities that we've talked about adding will add more people onto the site. And we still have a landlocked site, and we still have a flow problem on the site. So I urge you strongly to think about whatever incremental things you want to add to this site that bring more people, you are actually compounding the problem. And I'm going to leave, that's my thought on it. Sorry.
So Mark has homework.
So again, welcome, Mark.
I was saying, Mark drove here as a student, I'm sure, back then, and people were just as dumb on the traffic flow as they were when I drove to school. When there were half as many people.
Look at the time.
We're going to move on to the Emlen Tunnel real quick.
Tunnel, and then what?
We have a
Can I ask Danny one last question?
Sure.
Just one last question, because I saw it mentioned, and I attended one of the community's feedback surveys, is the concept of replacing the stone blocks that are pseudo bleachers on Enki, is that not being considered in here?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Emlen Tunnel.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So as far as the comfort station, several months back, the township was here and produced a sketch and some thoughts as far as a comfort station. Mr. Batchelor and myself have had a couple meetings with them, and what we're recommending is to approve an agreement with them now, and that way it's approved, and we will allow the process to keep moving forward. And if the township would like to change certain things within that agreement, they could come back to us, and then we would revise the agreement. That's kind of the short version of it, since we're running out of time. Mr. Batchelor, anything you would want to add to it?
No, I think we will send out, I think the board, we gave a draft of the agreement maybe a couple weeks ago, but I know there have been some changes, so between now and Friday, we'll get the board the status of what that agreement language is, and then it's something we could act on the following, at our next business meeting.
But in essence, we agree with the allowance of for them to put the comfort station on the property and whatever and generally what they put before us, we were pretty happy with that, right? We weren't into like building modification. We didn't ask for anything like that. All that's left is just the agreement.
Correct. So what we have is, we have a 1986 agreement that was drawn up, and we have boilerplate language for them to now move forward and build a comfort station. And the boilerplate language is just copies and just explains much of the language from 86. My understanding from talking to this committee before, or others, and just want to make sure this is the will of the committee, that since we have an agreement from 86, the board would like to have an agreement, since this is going to be a change to that property, that an agreement that specifies and lays out what is that change. part of that change would be, you know, that they would be required to bring their final plans to us, you know, to the school board, their final plans to the school board. Is that a piece that the school board still wants to see in that addendum, or is it, would they rather see us as a administration just handle that?
I think that the board has an obligation to the community to have seen the plans before we approve it. I mean, do other people disagree? I mean,
No, if we're
we've
gonna
all
get
agreed in
blamed for it, I wanna
concept,
see
we
it.
just want to make sure they're not putting up something awful on our property.
Yeah, we're gonna get credit, we're gonna blame, so I wanna see it before.
I think that what we're trying to achieve here is that the agreement is largely worked out. You know, we're aware of it because we've seen the draft. You know, what's challenging between the township and the school district is we only meet once a month as a board. They meet twice a month. So if we are trying to keep this process moving forward so that the township can also keep moving forward, so we can all work together is kind of, you know, and we've still got to, we want to make sure that you all and that we as a board are comfortable with, you know, the parameters of what's, you know, how the building's going to be maintained, and all those things are going to get worked out, and they're not substantially different from the 1986 agreement. This is just our attempt to keep things moving forward so that our once-a-month meeting timeframe doesn't continue, doesn't hold them up from them moving forward. And if they have some concerns, they'll come back to you.
Perfect.
Great.
We'll look to put that, we'll get the language to the board, the final language we have by Friday, and
You're
look
good?
to have it
Okay.
Yeah, I
approved
mean,
for Tuesday.
Yeah,
Right.
for me, I'm more concerned about the contractual obligation or the agreement obligation, whether the building is pink or green, so long as it's substantially what they presented to us and not, you know, 2 stories and with a slide and all, then do what you want with the design of the building, but in my,
They will be beholden to the neighbors. You know, and everything they put up, look, it looks lovely, it will be fine.
Yes.
Good, great. Okay, with that, we're going to bring the Citizens Advisory Committee. I know that we have a few members from that committee to come up and give us a brief, you know, overview. Obviously, you know, we are a little crunched for time. I apologize for that.
Imagine if we did 2 separate ones.
Pardon?
Can you
Oh, I
imagine
know,
if we did 2
right.
separate
So, yeah. So welcome, gentlemen. I know Mr. Webster and I know Mr. Moore. I'm not sure that I know your, oh, welcome. I know you're one of the newer members.
Tom Hawk, our newest member.
Yes.
And we have 2 additional members, Michael Salak and Bud Hirsch, who were not able to attend this rescheduled meeting, but they contributed to everything we have to offer today as well. I'm going to provide a brief overview of projects we've done in the past and projects we're working on currently, and then I'll hand it off to the people to my right to get into some details. As a reminder, we are appointed by the Finance Committee. We are community members with a variety of professional backgrounds who volunteer to give analysis on topics that fit with district priorities. We offer advice and suggested tools, but all of our advice is non-binding, of course. It's based on information we get from the administration and our own research and experience. Previous projects we have done have included a technology lease-buy review that turned into a broader technology analysis for the district. We also provided an analysis of properties that the district owns on Roberts Road. And last year, we did a capital planning memo that provided some potential tools that the district can use to assist with its capital planning process. We understand that the district has not yet implemented anything from that capital planning memo, but one of the major pieces of advice from that memo was to hire a new director of operations, and we're very grateful that the district was able to implement that for the good of everyone here. And our understanding is that Mr. Brooks is going to take a look at what we advised and see if it makes sense to implement any of our suggestions for the next year of capital planning. Current projects that we have now include a look at facilities usage and fees. We're not going to talk about that today. Again, with Mr. Brooks' recent arrival, we're going to have the district and the administration take a little more time and see what they would like from us on that project. Another project we're considering is contracted services. Think, for example, of substitute teachers, previously district employees. Now we have an outside agency contracting. The district has asked us to look at different types of contracted services that may be insourced or outsourced. We don't have any comment on any of those particular roles right now. And if you have any suggestions for the timing or format of that advice, we certainly would welcome that guidance from the Finance Committee or from the administration. One comment came up in the previous Finance Committee meeting about whether that contracted services piece was going to look at contracts for things like lawyers or auditors and how often RFPs should go out for them. We did not understand that to be in the scope of what we were looking at. So if that's something the committee wanted, that'd be something to consider down the line, but that's not what we're looking at this stage. The remaining two projects are financial planning and curricular field trip funding. I'm going to hand it off to Mr. Webster and Mr. Hawk to talk about financial planning, and then I'll talk a little bit about trip funding.
Thank you. I'm Dan Webster. This is Tom Hawk. We work closely together on the financial planning aspect. The committee works on all of these together, but the way we organize is we have individuals that take the lead on certain topics. So Bradley Moore is taking the lead on the contracted services. I took the lead on financial planning. Bud Hirsch, who's not here today, took the lead on the trip funding, which Bradley's going to talk about in a little bit. I'll also add that we currently have 5 members on the committee, but we are happy to have additional community members that might be interested in participating and helping us out on these projects. We have the 4 projects that we're going to be finishing up this year, and so the Finance Committee could be thinking about other things that they'd like us to start looking at. In terms of the financial planning, we were given the mandate of look at financial planning, and we talked to Ken and Michelle specifically about what does that mean? What part of financial planning should we look at? And it was determined that we really should be looking at what the district does now, both on a near-term and a long-term basis, and how's it executed and how can it be improved. So to execute on that, what we did was we looked first at the policies that you have. You have 2 policies right now, one on budget planning and one on budget preparation. We did some research on best practices, basically online, and then we spent a lot of time with Michelle. And I want to say, for all these tasks, Michelle and others in the administration, with Michelle coordinating everything, have been extremely helpful and attentive to giving us what it is that we need. And I want to just read one thing that's memorialized in Policy 603. It says the board considers preparation of an annual budget to be one of its most important responsibilities because the budget is the financial reflection of the district's educational and strategic plans. And I just wanted to highlight that because given that the budget that the district has is in the neighborhood of $100 million a year, it's encouraging, I'm sure, to the public to know that the board takes that responsibility of financial stewardship responsibly. Because we are running late here, our 20-page memo on financial planning pretty much speaks for itself, and there's a lot of good information in there. I hope you'll take the time to look at it, especially at the recommendations, which we try and lay out pretty clearly in there. But I'm going to try and summarize it fairly quickly in 3 different areas: planning, presentation, and process. And first, let me talk a little bit about what financial planning is. Most people will think of that as the budget process, and of course with the district that's the biggest aspect of financial planning. But there are some other things as well. There's intra-period assessments, how are we doing versus where we thought we were going to be. There's, if you're looking at new programs, if you're looking at a Bleacher project or a larger construction project, that involves financial planning as well. And then there are longer-term projections that are put together as part of your budgeting process to help give you some visibility beyond the current budget cycle. Some of the specific recommendations we have from our research that address the planning aspect specifically is we'd like to recommend that you try, and with Mr. Brooks, that you try and accelerate the capital planning portion of your annual budgeting process. Right now, the budget process involves delivering, as you all know, of course, but the public may not, delivering a draft budget in late December. And when that budget's delivered, the capital planning aspect of that has not been fully formulated yet. There's another aspect, which is one of our recommendations, which is the longer-term projections. The business administrator comes up with some longer-term projections that help inform your budget analysis, particularly because normally you'll get to a point where the initial budget may not, your revenues may not be covering your expenses, and you want to ask the question, well, what's it look like if we go out a few years? That also is not typically prepared when the December budget is presented. So one of our recommendations is that you try and accelerate those 2 aspects of the budget process because we think that they provide good context for what the actual expenditure needs are of the district in addition to the what I'd call more the operational type budget that you get in December. Those other pieces do follow within a month or two typically, but if you had that all up front, I think it might be, we think it might be helpful. The other, one of the other recommendations, so those are the first two. I have 4 recommendations. The third recommendation is when the budget's presented, there's some historical information that's presented, typically about 3 years, I believe it is. And then there's a year-to-date column that compares the budget for the current year versus where you are on a year-to-date basis. And then there's the budget that's being proposed to you. That year-to-date column is generally not all that relevant because it's hard to compare that to how you expect to end the year. Our recommendation is that you actually work towards having a forecast of what the end of the current fiscal year is going to look like, as opposed to just year-to-date numbers, so that you can compare where you thought you would be with the budget for the current year versus where you now think you'll end up with a forecast for that year, and then the budget for the following year, as opposed to looking at just what your budget was last year versus the next year, and then year-to-date numbers, which I think are generally not that meaningful to the budget process because it doesn't tell you where you're going to be at the end of the year. Just as an idea, a budget is where you expect it to go, and a forecast is where you think you're going to end up. So that's an important piece of understanding what the numbers for next year, putting them in context. This isn't because Michelle isn't capable of putting together a forecast, but the tools that she has to do that are fairly rudimentary at this point and generally self-made by Michelle. And one of the recommendations that we'll have that I'll address in just a couple minutes is working towards improving those tools. And then the last recommendation on our planning is these longer-term projections that I mentioned. Typically, you'll get a 3-year projection from Michelle, and we want to recommend that those projections are based on assumptions that you think are the most likely assumptions to occur, not conservative, not aggressive. And there have been some things that have been mentioned that suggest that those may be based on more conservative assumptions, just because you don't want to end up in a situation where you need more money than you thought you were going to need, for example. But one of the best practices in financial projections is you have a base case, but then you also look at cases that might be less optimistic and more optimistic. So we're suggesting that you approach the longer-term planning like that. In terms of the presentation, transparency and clarity of the presentations is, of course, very important. And one of the things that we found in our research, which may ring true with some of the board members and probably less likely with the board members here, is that the Pennsylvania School Boards Association does a survey every 4 years of school board members. And we found it interesting that the past 2 surveys, in 2014 and 2018, identified as the most difficult area of school board operation to understand as school finance and budget. So that just drives home the fact that it's very important for the business administrator to put together financial presentations that are easy for you as board members and also the public to understand. We do want to commend Michelle because the 5 years that she's been here, I've been following this for quite a while, as you know. There's been a dramatic improvement in the clarity of the presentation, so thank you very much for that. There's always room for improvement. One of the things that we did was we looked at what the township does, and there's a reference in footnote 6 in our memo that you might want to just take a look at. But they put together a budget that includes a lot of pretty charts and graphs, and I think the way they lay this out is a little more impactful and easier to follow, more user-friendly than more of the simple memo format that's currently used to present this information. So that's number 2, the presentation, planning presentation, and then just real quickly on process. It's important to go back and look at how well things are working, in this case financial planning and specifically the projections. The budget, you understand how that works because at the end of every year you say, okay, this is what we budgeted and this is where we ended up. In terms of this longer term projection though, which I think has a pretty significant impact on your budget planning process, it would make sense to go back every year and say, this is what we projected for 3 years last year, and then this is how, 2 of those years worked out, and maybe we're still in 1 year. But go back and kind of do a reconciliation of where you thought you'd be versus where you ended up. That also helps you identify variances and areas that you could improve to be better going forward. The second thing is I mentioned that the tools that Michelle has to do her forecasting are pretty limited. She has a spreadsheet that she's put together that helps her do forecasting, but it's very labor intensive. The software that she has, which was changed out at significant cost, I think $300,000 or $400,000 shortly before Michelle came here, isn't very integrated and doesn't provide her with tools. We're not suggesting that you go and spend another $400,000, but at some point there'll be a cycle where that software gets replaced. And at that time, you should certainly look at the tools that will help integrate everything within the district to make this forecasting process easier. And then lastly is just documentation. Right now, there's a process that Michelle knows well that the district goes through for the budgeting. But we're suggesting that that process be documented so that it survives any one business administrator. It's something that anybody involved in the budgeting process can reference at any point in time that they need to understand how the budgeting process works, the times and the various elements of the process. One thing Bradley didn't say is, in addition to the projects that we've done, we don't mean these to just be sit on your desk or file stuffers. We're here to help with anything you might want us to do in terms of implementing any of this. So we're available to help Michelle execute any of this or any of the prior things that we've done. Just ask us.
So thank you very much. I don't know, questions, comments? I'm mindful of the time, and I do appreciate it was a very comprehensive memo. We're good? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to save it to the end. It applies to everything, so it'll be my only comment on the work that they're doing. Especially in this case, interesting, I hadn't read to the last page of your 20-page part of your memo. Sorry. But I did have that question in my mind is, what do we do with this in terms of the budgeting? I do believe that we have made huge leaps and bounds since I've been on the beginning of this board. With Michelle coming in, we have had a structure every year. It hasn't really changed. It's evolved. It's gotten a little better. But in prior years, each year was different. And that caused a lot of confusion and a lot of work on behalf of finance committee members because you had to go home and personally connect the dots. I'd have to pull out 3 years' worth of books in order to understand what the book was that I was looking at for the year. So the changes Michelle has definitely implemented have made that life so much easier. Yeah, it's still a binder this thick, but I know where to go. I know what I'm looking for. We tit and tat through the year if we're moving things around, but it's clear why we're moving them. So big shout out for Michelle for that. I would ideally like to see us either have an AR or some sort of a budgeting process outlined that says this is what our budgeting process is. Not to constrain, but to provide that guidance. If Michelle's not here or when we get off this board, that there's a roadmap in terms of what is good budgeting process. I'm all in for that.
Yeah, in case, you fall down the other set of stairs.
Oh, good God. Don't say that out loud.
All righty. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you. I'm going to let us segue right into unless you have anything, the field trip memo.
Thank you.
Great.
Out of respect for the meeting following this one, I'll proceed briefly through this. The memo does speak for itself. We were asked to look at curriculum-related field trips, so this does not include athletics, music, and things like that. Our process was we looked at the policies and administrative regulations. We met with Dr. Rabarchuk and also with Michelle Deco to learn about how the policies and practices work now. Overall, the headline is we think that this is in very good shape. There are recent policies and administrative regulations. It appears that, for the most part, these trips are funded by parents and families. There is a provision for families who may have difficulty with that to receive funding from the district so that all students can participate in field trips. We have 3 minor suggestions that we think would improve the process for how trips are considered and approved ultimately by the district. Going out of order, for the sake of simplicity, we think that the trip approval form should include what the administrative regulation says should be part of the trip approval process. That includes the cost of the trip and then about 7 or 8 other items. We would be happy if the Finance Committee or the administration wants it to help draft a trip approval form that makes that kind of revision. We think they may as well conform to each other. Related to that, nursing costs are also something that can be part of field trips. We think that the trip approval form should include that as well. One caveat I will add, of course, is to the extent you're putting nursing costs on trip approval forms, you want to make sure that you're continuing to comply with Section 504, American Disabilities Act, special education guidelines, and that including that cost on the form does not preclude any student from participating in activities that other students are able to participate in. The final recommendation is a bit tortuous, but we found a potential ambiguity and inconsistency in how the policies are written and how the administrative regulations are written compared to with what is put in the board meeting minutes about how trip approval goes. I won't walk through all of those right now. They're set out pretty clearly in the memo. If you'd like further clarification about how those policies could be clarified or rewritten, we'd be happy to hear that.
Great, thank you for this. You guys are really great at the recap. Well done. Do we have any comments, questions?
Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the work, and I do hope that we'll get some of the items that you've put forth, especially capital improvement stuff, in working action, now that we have somebody to help us with it.
Now we have somebody to do it.
Yes, Sarah? Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to volunteer, and for anyone watching at home who's a Radnor resident who thinks this sounds fun, it is fun, please join us.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think I'm mindful of the time. Michelle, how would you like to proceed with regard to our the capital planning presentation?
Thank you, Jenny.
I am fine with moving that to the March meeting. Mr. Brooks only had about 5 minutes to look at it the first day that he was here. So I would like administration to have some more time to be able to refine it a little in more detail. What you have here is just the rough draft. One of the highlights that I want to point out to you is the fact that there is nothing in the budget for the Madsford Road Bridge.
Matson Ford Road Bridge.
Ford. So.
Right, okay. Well, why don't we table this for next month and let Mark get his head around the capital improvements and the capital plan, and and then that will still allow us to do that work before our committee meeting of the whole in April.
And it will also give
Our budget committee meeting of the whole.
Mark, Todd, and myself the opportunity to review all of the projects. We did start doing that just briefly to see if there were some that we were not going to get to and maybe we wanted to move around, and we should have that all done by the time we have our next meeting.
Great. Okay.
Is it helpful at all if I had questions, if I email them to you in advance? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, super. All righty, so with that, do we have any new business? I would like to, I think, Sylvia, you're actually technically part of the facilities committee. Yeah, I'm so sorry,
Oh, no, I was going to ask.
I enjoyed the Bleacher.
I was going to say,
can you put on your microphone,
Do you have anything to add now that Ms. Hofton's left?
I think I do kind of agree with what Mrs. Booker was saying about our focus has strayed so far from the bleachers. Like, Radnor has such beautiful facilities. My friends who play from other schools in the Central League who come to Radnor talk about Radnor has such beautiful facilities. If you go to Springfield, Upper Darby, or Marple Newtown, their fields are nothing like ours. And I'm in the marching band, so I go on their fields, and it's nothing like ours. And I think that putting in a 2-story field house, it is a little unrealistic, like Mrs. Booker was saying, but it's also not the focus. The bleachers should be the focus, and the field if it needs maintenance, and the parking is a big issue too. But I think that the things we want, the team rooms and the plaza space to be reconstructed, it's fun, and it's a kind of turning into a fantasy rather than what we need to be doing.
Got it. Well, I think that this is the preview of what it looks like to own a home. There's the nice to haves and need to haves, and you go to paint a room and all of a sudden you're, adding on a wing. So we're going to rein it in, and, we're going to be coming to work, by May. So it'll be good. All right, I'm going to just say, do we have, Yep, new business, public comment? Yep, come on up. Welcome.
Take your time.
If you could just state your name, and if you didn't sign in beforehand, if you would do so afterward.
Jeff Bajukas, and I signed in.
Thank you.
Sylvia, I hate to disagree with you. I do it respectfully to all of you. First of all, I went back and looked at all the work that you've done over the last several years, Ms. Booker, Ms. Stern, and all the hard work that was done with regard to parking. And I think it was a tough problem. There were solutions that you all came to, including what was done on Loop Road and the traffic light and dealing with PennDOT, that made all that hard work worthwhile. And what I'd say to you and implore you is not to do another Band-Aid solution. There are serious safety issues that implicate what we're talking about. Not the parking lot, but the Enki field. There have been multiple people who have fallen there. It's not ADA accessible. None of it is. The sidewalk is atrocious. The football field itself, while the field itself is nice, it's at its end of use. It's hard. I have a son who plays on it now. I have a daughter who plays soccer on it. It is definitely hard. It's going to need to be replaced. The bleachers themselves, obviously they have to be replaced, but there are no bathroom facilities. There are no bathroom facilities for any of the fields. There are a couple of porta-johns. So when you have hundreds of children that come there every night, there's no place for them to go to the bathroom. So figure that out. I mean, that's what's going on. There's no place for handicapped people to go to the bathroom. There's no place for my parents who want to come and watch their granddaughter play and their grandson play to go to the bathroom. The facilities for the snack bar, which we're referring to some of these things as amenities, there's no running water. There's a hose. There's no drain. There's no way to keep it sanitary. If the teams that come and visit our fields don't have locker rooms, the visiting football teams walk up the decrepit bleachers into our gym and stand in the gym for halftime. There are no bathroom facilities for them. So if the interior bathroom facilities have been trashed by people playing and misbehaving, they get closed and they don't get to go to the bathroom. Our players have to climb up these same bleachers and then go down into the bowels of the school to get into their locker room. This is not what it's like at other schools. With all due respect, Springfield's going to have a brand new school. Lower Merion schools are putting up large bonds to redo their field areas. This is part of this school. This is part of being a student at Radnor. If you went take a look at the weight room at Radnor and compare it to any other school in this area, it doesn't even come close. It's a hazard. There's not even enough room for a team to go in there. So you force these children who want to excel at athletics to go out and pay for training or to go to PSC. When you, Ms. Stern, when you talk about this is a capital improvement, it's time. It is time. I went back and I looked at 10 years of facilities meetings. The turf that's on the football field was donated. The turf that is on Inky was paid for by half by the community. Those are with the exception of things done to the pool area like HVAC, that is the capital investment that's been made by this district in the Radnor High School for sporting facilities, for facilities for non-athletes who just want to be able to work out, who just want to be able to take a class and do that on a given day. The band itself, you can't just replace the bleachers without thinking about all of the adjunct areas. The band, it's amazing to me that they haven't slid down the ramp and fallen over each other, particularly when it's raining. I mean, and it rained almost all fall. So I'd say, like, you started talking about the bleachers in 2015. That's what the records say. So I get it. It's a hard thing to solve. But we tell our kids, strive for excellence. Be great. We have to be great, and we have to give them the facilities they deserve so they can be great and not be injured. And so we as parents in a community feel comfortable coming to a place where we can celebrate their excellence and cheer them on. That's what we should be shooting for, not just getting part of it done, with all due respect. And I understand it's going to cost money. but I would submit to you the community's ready because it hasn't been asked for years and years and years. So please, we don't have to move parking lots around, but when we're talking about those facilities, it's important stuff. When the school was renovated, it stopped at the athletic facilities. The gym is not air conditioned. It is a sauna. If you go in that facility and then you go to any other school, you will see it is substandard. It is not the standard. Springfield's going to have a full new school. We saw pictures of it with weight rooms. And brand new athletic facilities. And our students deserve that. They really do. They don't deserve another partial fix like we've done over the last decade or two. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Is there any other public comment?
Yeah, I just want to make one point of clarification. The turf field was not donated. I want to be clear on that. It was a three-part. The community did a third, the township taxpayers did a third, and the school district taxpayers did a third. I just want to be sure that we're clear on that.
Got it. Okay, so with that and mindful of the time, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.